Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. We have in the studio today Rich Ezra. It's been interesting chatting with him as we were leading up to the show, just kind of getting his insight and appetite for the business. It's I think we've got really going to have a great show for you. Rich actually started out as a promotion coordinator for A&amp Records in Los Angeles. I'm going to want to touch base on that one a little bit. Herb Alpert was always a big idol of mine. And then from 1981 to 1987, Rich was the director of West Coast A&R for Arista Records. He signed the Thompson Twins to their U.S. deal. He worked extensively with the publishing and songwriting communities for material for such artists as Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick, Melissa Manchester, Tanya Tucker, Jennifer Warnes, and Jermaine Jackson. He also coordinated music, I'm going to assume, for the movie Ghostbusters and Perfect soundtracks. And then from 1988 to 1991, Rich worked on various independent projects. He produced the award-winning educational video for artists and musicians, How to Get a Record Deal. And boy, has that changed. Since 1992, Rich and his partner, Stephen Trumbull, have been running the Music Business Registry, which includes the A&R Registry, the Publisher Registry, the Music Business Attorney Registry, and the Film and Television Music Guide. We'll be touching on those here in a little bit, too. Rich has organized and coordinated the events and activities for the Independent Music Conference in Los Angeles, sponsored by BMI. The three-day symposium addresses problems facing recording artists, including publishing, management, touring, obtaining record deals, and exploring alternative ways to bring music to the public. No small feat in itself. In addition, he's written articles for Music Connection, along with the New England Performer and Musician. He teaches various classes on the music business at Musicians Institute in Los Angeles, as well as the School for Audio Engineering, or as many of us know, SAE. And he's also taught at UCLA Extension. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Bob.
Glad to have you. You know, when I look at your resume, I got to start A&amp Records. How was it to work there?
Well, it was a different era. It was 1980. I was 20 years old. And it was wonderful. Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, who ran that company, it was an exciting time. Although, it's funny. It was my entree into the record business, working at a record label for the first time. And what I didn't know at the time is that the industry was in a slump. It had gone into a slump in 1979, and it came out of that in like 82, 83 with the emergence of the British New Wave of artists. But at that time, it was very kind of, and all I would hear are these stories about, how great it used to be, how big the sales were, and this was kind of, all after the fact. But as far as I was concerned, it was a great, great time. To be at a record company.
How was Herb Alpert kind of a hands-on kind of guy?
He was hands-on. He had an office in the on the lot, and he used to come around. He was, very communicative with all of the staff and so forth. But he had a large staff of people who ran the label. Yeah. I mean, he didn't run it personally, but he had a large staff of people. But he was definitely there.
And of course, when you say on the lot, that was Charlie Chaplin's old film studio.
Correct.
And of course, now it's
Henson.
Henson, yeah.
Yes, still there. Historical landmark. And it's an interesting thing about that lot is that Universal, when the Universal Music Group was kind of formed, when it was Polygram and all of that was sold and it was going to be, one big group, Jimmy Iovine, who was kind of running things with Interscope, which was part of it, wanted the A&M lot, where he had grown up as an engineer out here in California and producer, wanted that whole lot, which they had bought, to be the Universal, but what they found was that it was a historical landmark, and therefore they were not able to make any of the construction changes that were going to be necessary to build what was needed to make the Universal Music Group, to have space for it. So they ended up going to Santa Monica and leaving it as is.
Very good.
Yeah.
Glad they did. Yeah. So, you and I both go way back in the music business. You actually got in the record business probably about 10 years before I did. But we both have seen some pretty drastic changes take place. One of the things we were talking about before the taping of the show was 2004 was kind of that pinnacle year for record labels, you know. And, of course, now the record deal, if it's even being offered today, is so much different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Tell us a little bit leading up to 2004, what you saw from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, I saw an industry that had become very, very, I won't say bloated, but very, very, very comfortable on the riches that the CD era of the previous decade had brought to them.
Right.
You know, the 80s and 90s brought tremendous volumes of cash for very, very little output. All they had to do was re-release a lot of these albums, and they sold in the millions, not for $5.99 like we were used to with a cassette and LP,
right,
but for, you know, 17, 18, 19, especially catalog titles. Eventually the price came down over the years, but so you had record companies, you know, who expanded tremendously in the 90s especially. You know, we were talking about Nashville, and you saw the growth in Nashville in the 90s. So suddenly when 2000 hit, we started to see, you know, the first sign was something called Napster. And Napster was the beginning of the end, because as I look at it now, when I say beginning of the end, it was the beginning of the transition. And what I saw was the transition that we were going to go, and it would take a full decade for it to occur, was the transition from a copy model of cassettes, vinyl, CDs. Even though we transitioned one time before, we transitioned to digital files.
Right.
Even that copy model was going to transition from a copy model to an access model. And that's what Napster was a forecaster of. And what I saw was tremendous resistance of the record companies, even going so far as the majors suing each other. You know, BMG and a man named Thomas Middelhoff was he was the chairman of BMG. He was the only person in the entire record business who saw the viable future of something like Napster and how the record industry at that time could really harness this. And what happened? The majors sued him for putting $60 million into a technology that he thought the record companies could really utilize in this transition.
Yeah.
Remember, they hadn't done anything, but he felt there's a future here. They have 60 million people. We can condition people to start using this to our advantage. They didn't want to hear about it. And like we were saying, the consciousness among the majors was, we don't want to hear about it. And when they finally even went to court, when they were just about, you know, before they went to court, there was a supposed meeting. And I think Steve Knopfer talks about this in his book, between all the majors and Napster, where they came this close, like within centimeters, of doing a deal for $1 billion. And you know what stopped it? Their ego. They just couldn't let go of the control. At that point, it wasn't about money. It was about the control. And that ultimately, to me, was what undid them all. Because it's, you know, when you don't, I don't know, I likened it at the time to a bad marriage, where neither party can see their own role in the demise of this marriage and keeps doing the same things over and over and over, hoping for a different result. And eventually it just goes right off the cliff.
One of the things I noticed, in fact, when we talked about prices of music, Walmart was our largest retail account for record labels. They were 52 to 54% of all of our business. And I'm talking about 25, 26, 27 accounts that we would call them, whether it was Tara Records or Licorice Pizza or Sam Goodies or Circuit City. Walmart was 52 to 54% of that business.
Sure.
And so, you know, we were selling CDs for $16.98, and Walmart was fine with that until iTunes came along. And, you know, very quickly, Walmart said to us, to the record labels, you can't sell these to us with a $16.98 retail. You have to do it for $13.98. And, of course, we all get the calculators out and the measuring sticks, and we go, okay, you know, $13.98, we can still make some money. That didn't last very long. The record labels came back, or I should say Walmart came back to us probably, you know, within a year and said, you now have to sell these CDs for $9.72. And we said, we can't make any money doing that. And Walmart was like, you know what? We'll put Game Boys in. We'll put PlayStations. It doesn't matter. We don't need you. You need us.
That's right. We'll give the space to something else.
Yeah. And so, as a former record label exec, we just I don't know if we chose to ignore it. That seemed to be the easiest route because we had controlled the dynamics and the system of it for so long. And in a lot of ways, we would sign artists right and left, knowing that one of them was going to make it and that one artist was going to carry the heavy load for everybody else. But those days are done.
Yes, completely done now. And yes, you're right. And of course, you're also talking about a time when there were 5 major labels. To support that system, you remember that was the only way that they made money back then, was by the selling of copies of those albums. And also, remember, the era you're speaking of had the other advantage too, which was that they had an outlet called retail.
Yeah.
Which does not exist anymore. There's no record retail unto itself.
No.
The Walmarts and the Targets still exist, but if you go into them now, you'll see the space they give to not only music, but also to DVDs and other things is less and less
it's
and less
a much
and less
smaller
and less.
footprint than it used to be.
Absolutely.
And of course, I go as far back in junior high and high school days when you had the old Columbia House who would,
an RCA record shop.
Join the club for a penny and get,
13 albums,
and you thought that was the deal of a lifetime.
It was.
And it really was back then. But so things have changed. I know that artists approach me every once in a while and want to talk about a record deal. Mm-hmm. And, I'm of the mindset now, this is a totally different conversation than we would have had, say, in 2004, maybe even in 2007. But the record deal isn't really that important anymore, is it?
No, it's not. And here's the thing. What I always tell artists is that, today, record companies aren't so much looking for talent to sign as much as they are looking for ongoing businesses to get involved with. Meaning an artist who is touring, an artist who has put out maybe an independent release on their own, an artist who has a large social media imprint, an artist who is building a base. That's what they're more interested in than anything. Can you show me that there's interest in you? I moderated a panel last year for Muse Expo, which is a big music conference here in Los Angeles every April. And I had the heads of promotion from Columbia, Warner Brothers, Universal, and from, I forget the independent label. And all of them said that, Columbia, the guy Lee Leipzner, spoke about an artist that they had found on the internet who had built up a base on her own with her own records. She had gotten enough traction with these songs. She was like 15 years old and had built up a base. They felt she had built up enough of a base to where they could then take this and do something with it. That's an entirely different conversation, Bob, to, wow, that's a great talent that we want to sign and we think the world should know about, versus this is something
and,
that's...
And let's print 1 million CDs and get it out there.
Exactly, and have a whole plan for it.
Yeah.
This is something that the world is showing us they're interested in, so let's take it and run with it. That's the difference today. That's what they're looking for.
This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, this is Bob Bender, president of Bob Bender Productions. Since 1987, our company has provided consultation and artist direction services for recording industry artists. If you're looking to take your music career to the next level, or simply need advice on jump-starting a project or marketing one that's been completed, then we're here to assist you with over 40 years of experience in the entertainment business. We offer individual or group sessions, in person, or over the phone or Skype consultations. Feel free to call our office at 661-326-1140 or email us at info@bobbenderproductions.com for more details.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
We're here with Rich Ezra. We're just starting to get into the whole, how the business model has changed. I know that, back in the day, the record labels, we would have, we'd have a $100,000 recording budget. We'd have a $50,000 to $100,000 music video budget. We'd have a $500,000 radio promotions budget, and then probably another $100,000 to $200,000 marketing budget. Now, like the artist you're describing, the 15-year-old, you're in a situation where if you're on YouTube and you're on Facebook and you're on Twitter and you have followers, for about $30, you can almost accomplish the same thing, it seems like.
Yes and no. I mean, I don't say that everybody who's on YouTube and Facebook can accomplish that. I mean, I think one of the major differences that I truly believe, which is something that people, mistake now, is that one of the things I've seen that's occurred in this transition is what has become valuable in that world that you're speaking of. It used to be that the record deal and all those monetary elements that you mentioned in the budget really mattered, because the labels controlled all of the distribution outlets and the press and the retail and the radio, and they had control over that. Today, we live in a different kind of economy. Today, the most valuable commodity of all is not money, it's not power, and it's not market share. You know what it is? It's the ability to get people's attention, because it's the most difficult thing to do. And I don't care if you're Disney with a $175 million budget, or you're Susie Jones in Ohio who's trying to promote herself and her music on YouTube. It's very, 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 very difficult. And, when you look at if you don't believe me, just look at your own life. Anyone listening to this, look at your own life. And from the moment you open your eyes in the morning until they shut at night, how many times is a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a child, a job, a billboard, a text message, an email, a website trying to get your attention for something? And how many times do you give it, and for how long? And you begin to see what I'm talking about, how difficult it is.
Perfect example. We're now in a visual stimulus environment to where the traditional television no longer makes sense. We're disconnecting from cable and from satellite. Everything is streaming. We all want that instant gratification. Please give me all 13 episodes of House of Cards right now. I'll binge watch until I can't see straight, but at least I'm satisfied. And that is something, that's a dynamic we wouldn't have thought of 5 years ago.
Right.
And it's now a common occurrence. I am old school. I still want, I should say, those albums that took you on journeys. When you dropped the needle, and that's, going back to vinyl, when you dropped the needle on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, you knew when it was over, you were exhausted, but you wanted to hear it again because it took you on such a great trip. Same thing with Santana, Abraxas, or Boz Scaggs, Silk Degrees, or even Michael Jackson's Thriller. They were all great journeys. Yes. Now we're just getting it in bits. And it's tough. And, of course, and then music, it's compressed now. We're not hearing it from an audiophonic standpoint like we used to. No. Because they're now mixing and mastering for earbuds.
Yes. That's a real shame.
And it is. I think today's generation's really missing out. But on the other hand, the artist is controlling their future. They are controlling their career to a certain extent.
I agree with you. They are. But here's the irony of it. And I tell artists this all the time, that in relation to that, we live in a world where the good news for all these artists, there are no more gates. Okay?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
No more gatekeepers. No more people saying you can't have a deal, but you can.
Right.
Okay, you want to know the bad news? There's no more gates.
Yeah.
That's the bad news, okay? Everybody at a computer and a web can do it.
Yeah.
And therefore, and that's what I was talking about before. What has become valuable in that world is the ability to get people's attention. You can make the music on your own. You don't need to spend as much as you spend on a house to make a record anymore like we used to. Those days are gone. The chairman of BMG spoke at MEDAM 2 years ago, a guy by the name of Hartwick Mouch. And he said that, the biggest challenge today is not, A&R and servicing, huge budgets. He said, when we formed BMG, after we sold off BMG Publishing and sold off the label in 2004 and 5, we decided that, and the reason we did that is, he said, rather than try to turn this massive thing toward where the world was going, we thought, you know what? Let it go. Get rid of the label, get rid of the publishing, and we'll start anew. And he said the reason we did that is because we took 2 years studying what we felt were our future customers and listening to them as to what it is that they wanted. And they didn't want, massive deals and dollars. They wanted micro kinds of services. That's what they wanted. And he said, and we are able to provide that now. We don't live in a world anymore where you need to spend huge sums of money to make a record. Anybody can make a record. It's now about bringing that record to the marketplace. It's now about getting people's attention in viable ways. You and I know you can make records, and artists make records all the time that they put up for free.
Right.
Look at The Weeknd. He's a classic example of somebody who did that. His first three albums were done for free and just put up on the internet. That's how he got discovered, was by doing that. There's another example that's evading me right now, but it's not you don't need record companies to make records.
I love the quote. I just looked it up to make sure I got it right. From Reggie Ham, who has written just, a ton of hits. And he said, music is the loss leader for T-shirts and concert tickets.
That's true for performing artists. Yeah. That's very true because they don't make money anymore. The record sales for big artists used to be a big income source.
It was. You used to go out on the road
to support
the album.
Now you go out on the road to make your money.
Right.
Even the giant superstars, with maybe the exception of Taylor Swift and Adele, make no money from record sales. I mean, the big, gigantic stars, the best they do pretty much, the Beyoncés, is $1.5 million, $2 million. That's nothing to scoff at. But there's a saying in the business now that goes, 2 million is the new 10.
Yes.
And that's the reality, is that nobody sells albums anymore. Nobody sells big numbers of records. You go out on tour to make your money because that's where and that can't be replicated. That can't be file shared or given away on the internet for free.
No, the downside of that is you can only play so many markets so many times.
Yes.
And then you get fatigue. And people aren't going to buy tickets. And we're starting to see that in the live music end of things. I get phone calls from agents all the time. My wife and I produced concerts for a few years. And, we get phone calls from agents going, hey, we want to bring so-and-so back. And we're like, we just had them 8, 9, 10 months ago.
Yeah,
we can't. Too soon.
It's too soon, and the market won't bear making that profitable for you or for us. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's great that we're putting money in the artist's pocket and the agent's making their commission, but it's a loss leader for us, so we're not going to do it.
Yes.
Where do you see the future of? Where do you see the future of the record business first, and then let's see where the future of the artist is going?
It's a great question because I see it on different levels. I see that the future of the record business, as we know it, the record business itself, there's only 3 left, and as you know, they are there, and they are only there by the grace of their parent companies.
Right.
You got to remember something. Sony Music exists as one of 154 divisions of the Sony Corporation. The moment that the heads in Japan say, you know what? No, let's sell it off. Like Time Warner did in 2004, 5,
right.
Okay? Got rid of that and 25 other divisions. Yep. It's over. And I think, the people running these companies know that. My feeling, Vivendi was the French utility company that owns Universal, would love for someone to come along and say, here's a check for Universal. They'd love to get rid of that because it's not really, it's like the weirdest thing in their portfolio.
Yeah.
Not really their thing. So to answer your question, I believe that the future of the record companies, as we know them, is going to be marketing and promotion. I don't think it's going to be talent scouting and the making of, catalogs and records. And I say that in the sense that nobody's done it yet, but I believe we're going to come to a point where the record companies are going to get out of the frontline business. And the reason is because, truthfully, I don't think they're needed anymore to give you money to make a record. Now, there's exceptions to that, but for the most part, records can be made less inexpensively than ever. Where I think the record companies are really valuable is in the marketing and the promotion of pop music, because that's where it requires the marketing and the money.
Right.
That's where I think their value is. And if you look, what are the most successful records of today? Are those kinds of records that require the big video budget, the big radio push, and independent promotion and marketing. Not building acts like, talk to the manager of 21 Pilots, a band that's doing very, very well now, on their fourth album. But that journey from 1 to 4, that's an interesting story, one that I think your listeners would love. Those are the stories that I think really help define the question that you're asking, where the record companies are going.
And you said it earlier too. It's 2 is the new 10. It's when we went from selling CDs, which had 10, 11, 12 songs on them, to selling downloads. We were selling 1 unit. Now, 1 unit of a CD was nice. 1 unit of a download, not so nice, because you're going from a net of let's say $5 to a net of 50 cents, and you don't have 10 times the consumers to offset that difference.
That's right.
You still have the same audience base, the same consumer base buying that music.
That's right.
And that's probably never going to change. And of course, now you're with the next generation that streaming is okay, and they're fine with that. And of course, from the artist's perspective and the songwriter's perspective, you have to have a lot of streams before you see any money. So I think you're right.
A lot.
You're gonna have to have 100 million streams to see anything above 4 digits. I think that the record labels, you're right. They're gonna have to focus on what they're still good at doing and do it good. And not rely on the retail end of things.
Remember, what they were good at was controlling the market.
Yes.
They had radio, retail, the press. And of course, when I say the press, you and I remember when the press was manageable, meaning that it was in numbers that we knew. No one now
and
knows.
It was printed material.
Yes, and there was limited amounts of it, just like there were limited amounts of record companies, okay? That's not the case anymore. I mean, somebody told me that the other day that they on the last count, there were 970,000 music blogs in the world. 970,000. I mean, like where do you even begin with that? And social media and all of this other things. They no longer, my point is, labels no longer control the process of making, recording, distributing, like you pointed out, at all. So therefore, they have to focus on what they do really well, which is that marketing element, which is the videos, which is the relationships they control. But it's limited. It's limited. Remember, when major labels were all kinds of music. You had Metallica and Sade on the same label. Or, excuse me, Sade and Ozzy Osbourne on the same label. You don't see that kind of diversity even at the major label level anymore. You just don't.
Well, it's not affordable. Can't do it.
No, and also there's not a wide diversity of talent that succeeds either.
This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
We're here with Rich Ezra. You and I could go on for hours, I think, but I'm going to get you back on another
Sure,
podcast
I'd love to.
here. Let's talk about the future of the artist. We've touched on it briefly that the artists they control the dynamics more than they ever have. It's what they do with it and how they do it. We used to say when I was in the record business, if you had a gold album in Yugoslavia, you still had a gold album. And of course, it was rated differently there than it was in the States. I think, our focus has got to get away from what we hang on the wall and be more of what we can put in the consumer's hands. And you're right, whether it's physical product or it's a digital piece of environment that they can listen to, that's the new spectrum we have to work within. So what is it that the artist is going to need to do now? What is it they have to get out and accomplish without that record deal?
Today, it's to me, it's about, and we were talking about this earlier, it's about the artist really giving some serious thought and consideration to the question of, is this my life? Is this my career? Meaning like what I'm willing to devote my life to.
Right.
Not, I'll give it a year or two, and if it doesn't work out, I'll drive a truck because I can make more money doing that. Because the artist of today that succeeds, I believe, is going to have a whole different set of criteria than before. No longer, and I say that because I believe that all of the systems that were there to support brand new talent are gone. The infrastructure financially at the labels for talent is gone. Labels much more now are interested in an ongoing business of an artist. Is that artist moving forward in their career touring-wise?
How many likes do they have on Facebook?
Social media. Yes, social media. How many likes? How much activity? Is there a response? Maybe it's not 1 million people, but are the 10 or 15,000 they have really active?
Right.
That's what they're looking for. So my point is that the artist today, I think, has to be so active and committed that when they're not writing, when they're not performing, that they are building their career and promoting themselves.
And because we're inundated so much, we have, we used to say if we can't capture it in 7 seconds, we're not going to capture it. It's now probably more like 2 or 3 because
Right.
I know when I get on my my Facebook feed or Twitter and I'm going down it, there's so much. I'm inundated with the material and I find something that I like and I click on it, and if it doesn't keep my attention for more than a second or two, I'm on to the next thing. And that's what these artists have to contend with, right?
That's right. That's why I was saying that I believe the most valuable commodity today in culture, as far as music goes, is not power, it's not money, and it's not market share. It's the ability to get someone's attention. And you, Bob, have just given the perfect illustration in your own life how that works. It's no different for an artist. When you put all of that together, you can imagine how many times a day you, Bob, are said, Bob, listen to my song, Bob, watch my video, Bob, come to my show. And how many times and things do you click on and actually do and follow up with that?
And stay all the way through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you get my idea of how difficult it is to get someone's attention. Now, put a new artist into that, and you begin to see that process. So the question becomes, how do you get people's attention? Very slowly. Very slowly.
In the old days in television, when you ran a commercial, you ran that commercial, 20, 30, 50, 100 times. You may not like the commercial, but after a while, the Geico Gecko, or the Progressive Flow Lady. I mean, it captures your attention enough to where you it's kind of that acronym AID. It's awareness, it's interest, and it's demand. First of all, you have to create that awareness and then turn that into interest and turn that into demand. And I think that's what the artist has got to do these days. They've got to just stay at it. They've got to stay the course. Don't you agree?
I agree, but I think the key word that you just said in your description is awareness, because it is the awareness that's the most difficult part. And this is important for artists to remember too, and I'll use your example. When we talk about the Geico commercial or the Progressive ad on TV in the day, okay, the difference is that we as a culture, all of us, whether, black, white, rich or poor, we all watched that television show or that TV, okay? We only had 3 networks. Now, I don't know what it takes to reach ubiquity in the culture today. And those things that do, they're either, spending staggering sums of money, or they've been very, 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 very lucky. Okay, because, it's not, the Super Bowl pointed out that, it's the one event a year, and there used to be several, that has over 70 million people watching it.
Right.
The only one, by the way, there isn't another single event. That'll tell you how difficult it is to get people's attention. There isn't a single event ever, anywhere, that gets more than 70 million people. That's it. It's 1 3-hour program, period, once a year.
Yeah. And
you better do it then. And even then, how many of those Super Bowl ads can you remember?
And out of those Super Bowl ads, which by the way cost $5 million to air.
That's right. And another $2 million to make.
Yeah. How many candy bars or Coke bottles or tennis shoes can you sell to recoup that?
Yes, exactly. And how much value are you getting? So the point that I make is that I think, it's the awareness that today how it applies to the artist is that the artist has to be doing so many more things. They can't just be out there performing. They have to be building a social network. They have to be recording. There was a study that goes along with this point that I thought was really interesting about artists, is that a huge music study that among top music fans, 50,000 music fans, and the study concluded that the number one thing that these music fans want from their favorite musical artists, the number one thing after the music, do you know what it was?
What is it?
Access to the artist.
There you go.
That's the number one thing. And woe is the artist that does not give that to them. They
absolutely.
will move on.
Yeah.
They will move on to someone else. And there's many examples of this that they illustrate in the article, including big acts that just have no communication or whatever. So that's a very, very important component, I think, in the artists today, is that they have to be aware of the many different channels to reach people. And they have to think outside the box. Most importantly, I think, for artists today, if they want a career in music, it has to become a way of life. Truly a way of life. In other words, this is the only thing that matters. It has to be the number one. I'm not saying, you can't have a life, but I'm saying your life,
right,
as it exists, must be committed 100% to this. If this is to be your career. Now, there's plenty of people out there who make music a hobby, and music can be a wonderful hobby. You know probably dozens of people, and have encountered them, as we all have, who, music's a hobby, and they play, and they have good times, and they enjoy it, but it doesn't mean that it's your life or your career. And for those that want to make it their life and their career, must be devoted to it in all the ways that we've been talking about.
The good news is, though, it is possible.
It is possible, and there's many more channels, like we've been talking about, and opportunities to do it than there were before. You had to be one of the lucky 100 or 200, back in the old days when, you got the deal with Sony or Columbia. Oh, good for you. Now you'll be hopefully one of the 12% that makes it.
Yeah.
And if you do, the world's going to know about you.
Yeah.
But we don't live in that world anymore. That's a bygone era.
Rich, it's been great having you on the show. We're going to do this again.
Oh, certainly.
We have
Thank
a lot more to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
Rich Ezra, great to have him on. This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender for Bob Bender Productions. Co-producer for the show is Vinny Rivas. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.